Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
I mentioned Steve Bannon, former White House chief of something or other. I mentioned him. I mean, he basically shaped and controlled Donald Trump's election campaign, didn't he? Not on his own, not single-handedly, but he prepared for a long, long time to get a man like Donald Trump in the White House. He was in France at the weekend, Steve Bannon. He's been doing a little tour of various European countries, Spain, Italy, France, to name just a couple, to name three, in fact. And at the Front National, so the French National Front's conference, he basically said, he said, we've come here to learn from you. He has come to France to learn from the Front National in France. And he said, if people call you a racist because you love your country and want it to remain white, you should be proud of that. You should bask in that description. I wonder whether anybody listening basks in that description. 0345 6060 973, the number to call. And Vince Cable over the weekend, I'm reminding you what each man said, because quite a lot of you are responding, certainly on texts and tweets, to what both men have said. Vince Cable said, amongst much else, in a speech he gave in Southport over the weekend, that too many, I think were his words, too many Leave voters voted to leave the European Union out of a sense of nostalgia, including a whiter Britain, wanting to see more white faces than not in this country. He didn't use the term racist, but it's been widely interpreted as saying that there was a racist element to that vote. Which of those two men are you with? Dave says Steve Bannon is trying to normalise racism. I suppose you have to talk about it, but I'm sure you'll have some appalling people calling in, says Dave. I've never been asked such a killer question. Choose between Vince Cable and Steve Bannon. I'll pass if you don't mind. The Leave campaign was tarnished by racial slurs, most of them cooked up by the media. How about Tony Benn and Michael Foot, godfathers of Keep Britain White? Not, and me neither. The EU argument goes much deeper, says Lorna in Fulham. Didn't quite understand the end of that text, but thank you for it. For some people, the rate and pace of change has been too fast. Successive governments have failed to implement real integration and infrastructure policies in place that would have smoothed the impact of change. Sheila has called from Churchill Langley, and Matthew in Barwell. I think you're going to disagree, you two. If you don't mind speaking to each other, that would be good. Good afternoon to both.
Hello.
Sheila, you think Vince Cable is totally wrong. Tell me why.
He's totally wrong. Now, I voted out, right, I'm an older person, a grandmother. I voted out because of the drastic changes that happened in the East End of London possibly in 3 years. Everything suddenly changed. You couldn't get on the bus. You couldn't get into the doctor's surgery. My grandchildren, the school was overcrowded. People in my street were speaking English no more. Also, that people came with a different culture. Nothing against them. It's the system that allowed it all to happen so quickly.
And how quickly did it happen, Sheila?
1 minute, Sheila. They would light fires in the back garden at 3 a.m, all shouting and cheering and whatnot. Maybe that's their culture. Then I would open my bedroom window. I'd say, it's 3 a.m, please let me get some sleep. And what happened, Sheila? I was forced out to sell my property, get out, for peace of mind.
When was this, Sheila?
Pardon?
When was this?
Oh, now, 1 minute. It was well before Brexit. Yeah. But I did vote out for those reasons. It's nothing to do with racism whatsoever. It was trying to cope with the drastic changes that were happening all around us. And so many people in that area had to do the same thing.
And did you find out where the people were from and who the people were who did this?
I found, when I called out the window, please let me get some sleep, it's 3 a.m, they didn't speak English, so there was no point, really, whatsoever.
So you wanted England to be a bit more like the England you remember?
No, not at all.
I thought that's what you've just told me.
They change all the time, but this change was drastic. The government allowed it, and they did nothing about it because they didn't live in those areas. But if you lived in those areas, you would vote out. That's what and lots of people I spoke to said the very same thing.
Let me bring Matthew in, Sheila. Stay with us, though, because I'm sure you'll want to respond to what he says. Matthew, respond to that.
Well, I mean, what I called to say was that I think that Vince has spoken, and you used the word yourself, Sheila, a very uncomfortable truth. And by golly, it is uncomfortable, isn't it? But it's nonetheless a truth that for some, and I stress, of course, he did, I was in the hall for this speech yesterday. I'm a proud Liberal Democrat, and I was there and I was listening, and I stood up and applauded at the end because I thought it was a very good speech. He was talking about some Leave voters, and you said it yourself, Sheila. I mean, I love LBC, but you just have to listen to this network on a daily basis when Brexit is discussed, and there is within the calls an element which you can't deny. If it's not racist, then I don't know what.
No, there is. I get. There is. I can see some racists calling in now.
And so Vince by definition is telling a truth. Not the whole truth about the Leave vote, of course not, but a truth. And, I think it's hit a raw nerve, don't you, Sheila? I mean, clearly it has what he said.
Are you asking the other Sheila or me? I think let's get Sheila. Well, let's get Sheila and Church Langley to respond to that. It's an uncomfortable truth, Sheila, that there's racism in that Leave vote, not necessarily yours.
No, not at all. No. People simply could not cope with that. It was almost like an overnight change, and no one dare say a word, because if you did, nobody wanted to hear it. I mean, I was saying nobody, the government or the councillors did not want to hear it. It was the attitude was, get on with it, But I don't blame the people who came in. It was the system that suddenly allowed it all to happen.
But Sheila, and I mean caller Sheila here, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Right, fine.
So I just want to be clear about something. Obviously, you had this experience, which in your eyes was not a good experience, and that's your lived experience. So I wouldn't want to counteract it in any way, other than to say that it's a bit worrying, in my view, that you have voted on such an important issue that affects the future of the whole country and all of our people, young and old, on the basis of one lived experience where you are. That concerns me, Sheila.
No, sorry, it was happening all over London, all over the place it was happening. So I'm not just one person voting. And then again, we all have choice, don't we? And I mean, of course, immigration is important, but not on that scale, where the whole area changed.
What would be acceptable for you, Sheila, in terms of immigration? What kind of level?
Maybe a point system, that sort of thing. And but you simply cannot allow. I mean, next door to me, where I was, one young man moved in, paid rent, another 20 moved in. And they would be arguing all night. I'd find them drinking beer in my front garden, and I'd come home from my shopping and I'd say, please, this is my garden. And he'd say, come on and join me with the beer. They had no idea. But
Sheila, is it possible...
It's not their fault. I don't mean
Well,
that.
it is. I have to say, it is their fault if they're behaving that appallingly to you, if I may say so. But listen, Sheila, your vote is to be respected. It's your vote. What you're describing to me, though, is behaviour that I've been on the receiving end of over the years as well, when I've had rude neighbours, ill-mannered neighbours. And the most recent example of it is a rather wealthy, posh British family who live 2 doors up from me and have extremely rude teenagers. What do we do? Do we have a vote to ban teenagers?
Of course not. That is a totally different situation, Sheila, altogether.
Why is that different, Sheila?
Can you imagine having to sell your property at my time of life and simply get out?
Oh, yes, that's terrible that you had to do that. No,
it was my only
Sheila, can I make one further point?
I mean, did I want to do that? Of course I didn't want to do that. I had my local library, everything there.
Which you liked.
That I wanted.
Yeah.
When you're driven out, yes, you would take a drastic measure and vote out. Of course you would.
All right.
Why not?
Okay. Matthew, I think Matthew...
People, if you went to the local pub or the local restaurant, you found everyone saying the very same thing if you bothered to walk the streets and ask the questions.
All right, Sheila, let Matthew respond to what you've said, and then we'll go to the news break. But I'd like to hear from Matthew as well. Go on, Matthew.
Thank you, Sheila. I just wanted to raise a point. I don't know if you saw the video doing the rounds on social media this past weekend, and I have to say it was someone from the BBC, Sheila, so sorry about that, but Nick Robinson, who'd gone to a Leave voting community, and he started by asking them, what do you think about immigration? And they said, these folks shouldn't be let in, it's disgraceful. Then he went through various different actual job roles that these folks do, like helping in hospitals, like the picking
Care
the fruit
sector.
and all of that. And they said, oh, yes, no, but we need those people. And, oh, we need those people. And, oh, we need those people.
Welcome to one of the top Brexit-backing areas in the country, Mansfield in Nottinghamshire. 70% here voted to leave, and it doesn't take you very long to find a clue as to why that was. Do you want to see immigration the same? Do you want to see it cut? Do you want to see it go on? Cut. You think it should be cut?
Yeah, it should be capped.
Do you think we need to cut immigration in this country?
Yes.
Do you think immigration needs to be cut?
Yeah,
You do?
I do,
You
honestly,
do?
yeah.
So far, so simple then. What's a little more tricky is deciding who exactly should be let into the country and who should be kept out. Ask you a question. Do you think immigration in this country needs to be cut?
Yes, I do.
Who should come in then? Who should we let in?
Professional people.
Professional.
Yeah.
What, people with skills?
People with skills, yeah.
Should we let any unskilled people come in?
Well, I think they should be monitored.
Well, let me just ask you about a few different groups. This is my Happy Families game.
Right.
Do you think we should have foreign bricklayers coming into the country?
Oh, yeah.
You would let foreign bricklayers? Okay. What about fruit pickers?
Controlled, I think.
Or would they come in?
Well, controlled, yeah.
So some
Certainly,
will come in.
yeah.
Some foreign fruit pickers. What about care workers looking after the elderly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so we'd have some of them from abroad. Lorry drivers?
Yes.
You haven't said no to anybody yet. What about chefs?
Depends. They're kind of chefs, yes.
Some chefs, okay. Who don't you want to come in?
Well, you know, just say it's got to be controlled.
But you haven't identified a single job that you don't want foreigners to do.
It's not the jobs, it's the people who want to come over and sit on the backside and
do nothing.
And do
Scroungers.
nothing.
Yeah.
Scroungers, yes.
But in this area, do you think a lot of the immigrants are scroungers?
No.
No,
Most of them are hard
they're
workers.
prepared to work.
See, what's interesting to me is you want to see immigration cut.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
single job I showed you, you said we need them coming from abroad. So who is it we stop coming then?
Well, I don't know.
You've stumped me.
Yeah?
I'm stumped for words.
And of course, what he did, Sheila, was he destroyed their argument. Their argument was based on a guttural reaction. It wasn't based on sense.
Right. Well, I will leave it there simply because of the time. But Matthew, thank you. Matthew in Barwell. And thank you very much, Sheila. Sheila in Church Langley in Essex. Post-Brexit, post that vote, a whole new type of conversation has emerged in this country, and we need to have it. We need to have that conversation. We need to say who we are and what we think. Kevin in Doncaster is not afraid to do that. He's called. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Sheila.
Did you vote Leave for that reason?
Not totally, but you can't call me a racist. I'm a nationalist. And yeah, I would love my country to go back 40 years. When you look at archive films of what it used to be like on the streets of London 40 years ago, yeah, I'd prefer that myself. Now, if you want to call me a racist for that, please do.
Did you live in London?
I didn't, but I visited London.
Right. And what's gone wrong?
I don't visit London anymore.
What's gone wrong?
Well, you know, everyone knows nowadays that it was a plan. You know, by well, they call him actually Richard Kulenoff Kalergi, and he had the plan for this to make Europe and the world really just one colour. That was like 60, 70, 80 years ago, and you can see that these planners who have just carried it on.
Well, I know the so-called plan to make the world one colour that you're talking about, but personally I don't buy it. I don't think it was ever the plan, a plan. But can I bring it closer to home and ask you about your life and why in your life you felt that Leave would help to keep Doncaster, where you live, more like you want it to be? Tell me what it is that you want it to be and whether you think Leave has or will achieve that.
To be honest, Sheila, Doncaster, it's quite what you would call a white town. Now, if I go back to Rotherham, where I was born, that is not. You know, that has had a lot of multiculturalism forced upon it by this plan. And the councillors, they've had to do what government have told them to do. It's like the you know, the like the Grimsbys and Clactons of this world. You know.
So you truly believe in your heart of hearts that there is a plan to wipe out whiteness?
Yes, throughout the world. And this is not an isolated incident with Vince Cable. David Cameron has said about white faces. Diane Abbott, who's the biggest racist in Britain, she's said there's too many white faces in Britain. Sadiq Khan...
She didn't say that. She didn't say that. Diane Abbott didn't... I know the quote that you're referring to, and it was a very unfortunate quote, but she did not say there are too many white faces in Britain. And I would urge you... I'm not going to call you a racist, Kevin. I'm going to let your words speak for themselves and people can make their own judgments at home. But, you know, just... You've said it yourself that Doncaster is... You know it better than I do. You live there. I've been there a few times. But that it is still, quotes, very white. Other places you say aren't. But just look around the nation and decide for yourself how successful this plan to make it less white actually is, or to eradicate whiteness actually is. And maybe look up from the conspiracy theories and just look at some facts with your own eyes about whiteness and brownness. Kevin, thank you for your call. Kevin in Doncaster, saying it very clearly as he sees it. Sarah, good afternoon to you.
Hello. Yeah, hello, Sheila. I just wanted to say that I'm a black person who voted Brexit. And yes, I voted Brexit because I wanted England as it used to be.
Describe England as it used to be.
I'm not happy with people coming with of different colours, white, all different races, coming to the country who don't respect and value British values and the British law. I'm not happy with, particularly with the influx of Eastern Europeans who come in, and I feel that they're very lawless. I feel there's nobody more racist than the Eastern Europeans. I have 2 black children at school, and the amount of racism they face from Eastern European children, having learned that from their parents. I do not like the way things have changed. I do not like the way that there's an influx of people into this country, and so our indigenous children, black, white, Asian, whoever, are squeezed out of the job market because we've had so many people influxed into this country. So yes, I don't like Britain as it is now. So where does that place me on this?
I'm not sure we are squeezing people out of the jobs market because we've got loads of vacancies that people aren't filling. Sarah, so maybe that's about our education. Well, we won't know. So no, you can't just say sorry. It's a fact.
Okay, can I speak?
Yeah, but just don't shout down facts. That's all. I won't let you speak if you shout down facts.
When I say squeezing young people out of the job market, what I'm saying is about the wages for young people nowadays. They cannot afford to buy a house, buy a mortgage on £7 an hour.
And you think that's the fault of foreigners, do you?
I think that absolutely.
You don't think it's got anything to do with austerity, with the financial crash, with government policy, with employers abusing people? You don't think it's got anything to do with that? It's the fault of foreigners?
No, I think it's because we have too many people on the job market prepared to accept wages of £7 an hour. So that means that our children, as I say, black, white, Asian.
Well,
I'm talking about all sectors, all colours here. I'm saying that because there's an influx in the labour market, it's driven down wages.
Do you know who the biggest employer in this country is?
The public sector.
NHS, yeah, and clearly it's government policy on their pay that is keeping their pay suppressed, isn't it? Nothing to do with foreign people. In fact, foreign people are shoring up the NHS by turning up every day to work in it. Are they acceptable?
No.
They're not acceptable either. You'd rather they were white or indigenous black? Is that what you're comfortable with?
I'm saying that the wages, even within the NHS, even within the public sector, wages have driven down there. A lot of stuff is outsourced, so people that...
But that's got nothing to do with race, so bring it back to race.
No, I'm talking about numbers. I think you're right. I think the point that you're making is exactly what I'm saying, that it's not about race. It's about numbers. It's about numbers. So you saying that people voted Brexit because absolutely there's a racist tone to it.
In some cases, not all, by any means.
I'm talking about sheer numbers.
Well, you began, Sarah, if I may, you know, one of the things you need in this job is a listening ear and a good memory. You began this conversation by talking about people who disregard British values and British laws. You were not talking about numbers.
It's everything. It's numbers. It's the people that come that disregard this British values and British laws. It's everything. It's the whole spectrum. Don't pigeonhole us. Don't, because it fits into your narrative.
I'm not pigeonholing anybody. I'm asking you questions and then I'm challenging your answers.
There are lots of black people that have voted Brexit for the same reason. But let's have our voice. Please, all the other black people, all the Asian people.
Be my guest. You are my guest.
Please vote. Please don't leave me for it to appear as if I'm a lone voice on this. Please phone in and speak about why our young people who are trained up in medical school cannot get a job as a GP here, cannot get a job working as a doctor here, because they'd rather bring in people from outside this country. Our young Asian people, black people, white people.
Do you know, Sarah, do you know why we're bringing in foreign doctors? Because it takes 10 years to train a doctor and we have singly failed to train enough of them. That's why...
No.
Oh, yes.
Trainee doctors, please call in. There are numbers of them that are called... I listened to a programme, an LBC died in a couple of weeks ago, where we had numbers of trained doctors who cannot get a job within the NHS. They're trained up, but they cannot get a vacancy within the NHS because the NHS choose rather to bring in people from outside of this country.
Well,
so you get your facts right, Sheila.
Well, no, for years in... I think maybe you're confusing it with nursing. For years in nursing, that's definitely the case. Instead of giving people staff jobs, they co-opted...
I'm not confusing it with nursing. I'm not silly. A doctor.
I didn't say you were silly.
I'm not confusing it with nursing.
Can I ask you an open question, just a wide open question? Do you think it's possible to be black and to be racist, or do you think it's impossible to be black and to be racist?
Do I think it's possible to be black and to be racist? I guess if you have a hatred for somebody just because of their colour and you don't like because of their colour, I guess it's possible to be black and to be racist. It depends. Don't just say because you're black and you don't like somebody. You've got to understand the reasoning behind it. It's too easy. It's too lazy to say if somebody doesn't like a certain culture it's because they're racist. You've got to scratch the surface and see beneath it. So I guess it is possible, for somebody just to be black and to be racist, but it depends on the reasoning behind that.
OK, so there's acceptable racism and there's unacceptable racism. Sarah, thank you for your call. Sarah in East Ham. Tracy says, I'm a black woman who grew up on a council estate. I saw nothing but white people, except a few black kids at school till I was about 16. Some were bad-mannered, some were not. Nothing to do with their colour. I now live in Ealing. I couldn't tell where anyone's from, and I don't care. I love it, says Tracy. Let's finish on a high. Chris in Colchester, hello.
Hiya. Yeah, I'm just getting fed up with this hysterical headless chicken propaganda. It's outrageous to blame Russia before we've got any evidence. We should have learned from last week, because throughout the whole week we were told that Mr. Skirple had been attacked outside in the street. But then it turns out on Friday, thanks to the Telegraph, it looks like he was actually attacked at home.
Well, we'll find out probably at 5 o'clock, won't we?
Well, I wouldn't trust what Theresa May says or our intelligence agencies. It's just getting ridiculous.
You think you're okay? Hang on a sec, Chris.
Can I just say something?
Well, no, hang on. You've just said I won't trust what Theresa May says. You think our Prime Minister's about to walk into the Commons and just tell a barefaced lie, do you?
Well, politicians do that all the time. But can I just...
In the Commons?
Yeah. But we have to look. Who has the most to gain from this? Certainly not Russia. They're involved in a prisoner swap. So for them to kill him, that would mean that any other prisoner swap they're involved in would say, no, we're not going to do that because you've killed you tried to kill that guy. It's 10 days before the election and it's 100 days before the World Cup. Putin is a gangster and he's bad enough to do this, but he's not a moron. He would have to be a moron to do this, and I just don't believe he is.
Well, you say that they could have got him any time, but I suppose alive and a swap, they can get they can get something out of him, can't they? And they'd done that, which is why they didn't kill him just years ago, because they wanted him to swap with someone else.
Well, they could have tortured him and got stuff out of him when he was in prison. When they had him in prison, they could have killed him then. And also, why not just shoot him? Why? It just seems all this hysteria about it's chemical weapons, and it kind of has a link to accusations in Syria as well. Who's to say that the jihadists that have been learning how to handle chemical weapons in Syria, who come back to England, aren't involved in this? We don't know who's done it, and we've got to wait for the evidence, if there is any.
Well, we do, and we're going to hear in an hour's time here on LBC. We'll bring you what Theresa May says. But, Chris, it sounds to me like no matter what she says, you will not believe Russia's capable of this.
Well, I just want to see the evidence. With Mr. Litvinenko, it was, we believe he did it. He probably did it. We're confident he did it. That's not evidence, I'm afraid. And I like to see evidence. Our politicians and our war industry have ulterior motives in this, and they want conflict with Russia. The whole thing about Russia meddling in the election and him bending over for Putin, he actually bends over for Israel, Donald Trump. He doesn't bend over for Putin.
Chris, thanks, I think, for your call. Chris in Colchester, thanks very much indeed.
Let's get back to what Mrs May ought to do, given the strong words she's made in the House of Commons today. What next? Mick in Brentwood, a new caller to the show. Welcome.
Oh, good evening, Nigel. At last I get to speak to you. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for the first bit of calm, reasonable, rational approach that we've had all week to this hysteria that's been going on. And hats off to Jeremy Corbyn, I say, for saying what he said. And I am, Nigel, I have to say I am very pro-Brexit, very much a supporter of you, especially when you got together with George Galloway. You went right up in our house when you did that. And even though I'm a lefty, we'll probably disagree on a million things. But yeah, no, honestly, the Russian hysteria, I've got a quote from Putin the other day talking to Megyn Kelly from Fox News.
Yep.
And Putin says the following. He says, "You're constantly interfering in our political life." And then he says, "Do you know what the Americans told me?" He said, the Americans told Putin, they said, quote, "Yes, we do interfere, but we're entitled to because we are spreading democracy and you are not." Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't that Mick the justification for Afghanistan, the justification for Iraq, the justification for Libya?
Totally. And this is the thing. These snowflake globalist fanatics, Majid Nawaz and all the lot of them, O'Brien, the lot of them, they are deeply, deeply racist.
Are you talking,
people.
Nick, are you talking about my fellow presenters on LBC?
I'm saying that they come across as being for the poor. They are deeply colonialist, racist people who are
that's a bit strong.
Globalism. In my opinion, that's what they are.
Well, no, Mick, we all have our opinion.
James is in Berwick on tweet. James, what would you like to say?
Oh, yeah, good morning, James. Yeah, thanks for letting me on. I'm just, I'd like to be a bit more sceptical about this line that Russia necessarily had to be behind it.
OK, Theresa May's getting her information from MI6. Where are you getting yours from?
Well, MI6 also, if you remember...
It's not a trick question. Where are you getting yours from?
Well, 45 Minutes was an MI6 thing. Do you remember that?
That was John Scarlett. And of course, what our wonderful liberal democracy has done subsequently is debunk that. So I'll ask you again, where are you getting your information from?
Well, do you know what happened then? John Scarlett became head of MI6.
Where are you getting your information from?
Well, okay. Michael Portillo, he was on a BBC programme politics programme last week. He gave this offered it as a possibility that somebody is trying.
So Michael Portillo is your source?
No. Well, he just said as a possibility someone's trying to discredit Russia. Now there are two questions. I would like to ask two questions. Why would the Russians not be able to delay doing something like this until after the World Cup that they've spent billions on?
Because they don't care.
Well, they've spent billions. You just said that everything's about money. You just said
but they don't care. They don't think we've got the cojones to pull out. I thought that was obvious. You should probably check with Michael Portillo.
Why would they risk it? Do you think it's because they're afraid of the English?
Because they look even more powerful when we start saying, well, we shall do, we're like King Lear, mate, on the heath. We're saying, I shall do such things that they shall be the terror of the earth. What they are, I know not. We look pathetic, and we look even more pathetic if we don't respond accordingly. Can I ask you again what your sources are for your scepticism that sees you refute what the security services have told the Prime Minister?
As I said, I just
Michael Portillo.
I just told you Michael Portillo.
Okay.
He said it was
so he suggested that Theresa May, I was in bed last night, he suggested Theresa May was lying yesterday, did he?
No, what he said is he just offers as a possibility that some spy agency or somebody is trying to discredit Russia. And the other
with a nerve agent you can only get in Russia.
Well, that is one of the things that points to it, isn't it? After all, I mean, it's not exactly
points to what, mate?
It's not the most subtle way of doing away with somebody, is it?
They have utter contempt for us. That's why. They don't want it to be subtle, do they? What's the point of murdering somebody who, without everybody knowing that you've murdered him? The only circumstances you do that is if you fear the country in which you're doing it. So the reason why they've been even more brazen now than they were with Alexander Litvinenko is because Putin considers us to be even weaker than we were then. What was your second question?
Okay. Why would they do something that attracts all this attention and points directly to them? Not everybody, incidentally, goes along with the Laurel and Hardy thesis on Litvinenko. The idea that they contaminated themselves and left a trail, a glow-in-the-dark trail for Scotland Yard to follow.
Again, where do you do... well, the answer would be the same. If you hold this country in utter contempt and are aware that what Theresa May described as international relations after the Litvinenko investigation was completed would prevent her from pursuing a more robust response. It's called cocking a snook. It's called laughing in our faces.
So why not wait until after the World Cup?
Because they're laughing in our faces. And again, I mean, these conversations are just weird. What do you think you're sort of doing? You're sticking up for mystery spies who tried to kill a bloke in Salisbury for reasons that Michael Portillo didn't mention on the telly last night. Do you not know what you sound like?
Well, I mean, there is a lot more to this world.
What motivates you, James? Well, when you get up in the morning and you're given... I appreciate that sometimes governments lie to us, sometimes they mislead us, but they generally do so in what they sometimes mistakenly believe to be the national interest. You sound like one of those blokes who's built a bunker in the woods because you think that the world's going to end at the end of next year. What inspires your enthusiasm for these odd theories?
I'm a Remainer, James. We're on the same page on a lot of things. But
I'm not talking about that. What inspires your enthusiasm for these weird theories? Why would you get up in the morning and go out looking for a weird theory?
Your colleague, Iain Dale, there is very interesting.
So that's Michael Portillo, Iain Dale. But I just want to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm telling you, James. We should ramp up defence spending. He was just saying there. Well, that's interesting. Do you know how serious?
You've had your fun. You've had your fun, James. Have a great day. David is in Palmer's Green. David, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'd like to start this by saying I'm actually incredibly left-leaning.
You've only got a minute, but I understand why you've established that. Now crack on.
Okay. I think Putin is clearly by far the best leader Russia has ever had. If you look at the history of Russian leadership, if you read something like Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, to read what Russia was really like during communism, or read about the history before communism, these are people who've had it really, really tough. And he's taken them to a place they've never been before. And the idea that we could have someone who abides by my liberal values leading Russia is absolute fantasy. They'd be murdered.
Okay, is that
it? Pretty much.
Okay. Well, good luck.
Michael has called from Taunton in Somerset and Suzanne in Brentwood. God or no God, Michael?
Oh, hi, Sheila. Good to speak with you again. I hope you're well. 12 years ago, it was no God. Now, it is God. And I remember what it was like to think and be in a state of unbelief in God, because there were times when I'd look at creation and the order of the universe all around me, and I knew deep down in my heart that it could not have happened by chance. There was too much order. I'm ex-paratrooper, a Royal Engineer. I worked with plastic explosives and mine warfare. And whenever we blew anything up, order never came from it. So that used to get me concerned about the Big Bang Theory. We only get death and destruction from big explosions. Now, I didn't want to think about that too much, because going down that path would then would make me admit God exists, and I would have to obey him. And that came against the root of my problem of unbelief. I knew there were things in my life called sin that I'd have to give up to obey God, and I loved my sin more than God. To say we came from apes as an unbelieving man, I found that an insult. I thought it was ridiculous. Just because we.
But why? Why is it necessary? I mean, I don't want to go too much down into the because we argue this stuff so much about creationism and otherwise. Because I know the Vatican isn't the only voice on God. I'm just using it because it's one I'm familiar with. It's accepted. Evolution. The theory of evolution is accepted by most mainstream religion now, Michael.
Well,
not yours.
True Christians, and the Bible makes it clear, God created. There's no room for evolution there. And God made man in his image. He didn't make man. He didn't make man in the image of the beast.
But you don't know what that image is. We don't, do we? There is that sort of irreducible complexity of what we don't know about as much as what we do know about. But you've had you're describing your moments of awe and your moments of belief, and I respect that. Michael, thank you very much indeed. Michael in Taunton.
So Graham says, I've not heard of any strong response from the EU. Have I missed something, Ian? Yes, you certainly have, because all sorts of people in the European Commission, Donald Tusk, Guy Verhofstadt in the European Parliament, you've had the President of France, the German government, loads of them have actually said some very, very helpful and supportive things. So let's not try and, I don't know what your Brexit views are, Graham, but let's not try and sort of insult people and say that they're not saying anything supportive because of Brexit, because the actual opposite is true. If you look at Guy Verhofstadt's tweets, very, very supportive indeed. Joe's in Lowestoft. Hello, Joe.
Good evening. I'd just like to say, I don't think it's a surprise with the way this government has run the country. We've cut the police force to the bone. I mean, my local police station, I think it's down to about 3 blokes and a dog, and the dog's about to retire. I've got an army that it's an actual fact that you can fit the whole of the British Army into a football stadium. We're leaving. We've got Brexit. You just mentioned Brexit. We're leaving Europe. We've got loads of backup there, as you just said. Well, we won't get that anymore.
Well, that's just rubbish, because we will get it anymore, because we're members of NATO, and all the countries that I've just mentioned are also members of NATO. The European Union is not a defensive alliance. NATO is.
I wouldn't hold your breath. If you think we've got a special relationship with the US, and as NATO goes, nobody puts any money into it.
We do.
We do?
Yeah.
Do we?
2% of our GDP is spent on defence.
We don't meet that. I think
well, we do meet that, Joe. With respect, mate. Everything you've said so far is an absolute load of tripe, and I don't think we're going to continue, because we're not going to get much sense out of you, are we?
What does Ruth from North Allerton in Yorkshire think? Good evening, Ruth.
Good evening.
So Parliament didn't like him today, Ruth, but what about the country?
Well, I can't stand him, but I thought he was exactly right, because Theresa May said, oh, trust me, Brexit means Brexit, and now we're going to be in until my granddaughter's an old age pensioner, and we're going to be paying in till 2064.
Yes.
Quite frankly, I think it's a red herring drawn across the path to take people's minds off what's really going on. Why have we got all these people here? We have got the riffraff from the 4 corners of the globe living here.
Do you feel that, Ruth?
Pardon?
I mean, surely, but we also get some very good people come here too, don't we?
But we've still got all the riffraff, and we've got our own riffraff. We don't need to import it, but we do. We've got these Russians here with their funny money that they've never got legally. You've got, I think, is it Deripaska that owns the Evening Standard that George Osborne's working for?
No, I don't think. No, he doesn't. He doesn't.
Deripaska on a yacht with Osborne.
Well, Deripaska is one of the biggest producers of aluminium in the world, and he did spend some time on a yacht with George Osborne and Peter Mandelson. But let's leave that there. But Ruth, you know, do you really, do you in your heart think that a British Prime Minister would stand up before the country and the world, expel 23 foreign diplomats, and do it without really having the evidence?
What is all this about? We've got policemen wandering around Salisbury in spacesuits, and they're telling people that were in the restaurant and the pub to wipe their spectacles with a baby wipe. So if a baby wipe's good enough, why are they in spacesuits?
Well, I can't answer that. I can't answer that, Ruth, I suppose, because they're worried there's more of it. So you are just completely, you're completely cynical about all of this, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. And I tell you another thing. I remember when John Bercow was a member of the Monday Club, and he was going to be Minister of Repatriation. Well, what do you make of that now, then, John Bercow?
John Bercow has been on this most astonishing political journey from the Federation of Conservative Students, who were so extreme that Norman Tebbit actually banned them as an organisation, and you say Monday Club and all the rest of it. Now, he seems to have this dramatic journey to the left. Whether marrying Sally had something to do with that, I just don't know. But I don't really care about his politics, Ruth. What I care about is he is demeaning the role of Speaker of the House of Commons. That's my view.
He was too grand to wear the uniform. He is a nasty little man, actually.
Well, that's your opinion, Ruth. And Ruth, you have a lot of very strong opinions, which makes you a great caller into LBC. Thank you.
Kathy is in Abingdon. Kathy, what would you like to say?
Hello, don't be scary, James. I'm just an ordinary common sense mum here.
Common
but
sense.
I believe it's to derail Brexit. I'm the conspiracy theorist here, and I think that basically it's to make us look isolated and vulnerable against Russia.
We are isolated.
Stay in the EU.
Okay, and who's
they need to
pulled
give Putin that sample. They need to give him. They've got every right to that sample to see what it is. I don't believe the Novichoks come from them, and I don't see what Putin had to gain. Why would he do it before the World Cup? Why would he do it before the elections? It does not make any sense.
Okay.
And there are bigger things
I can answer all those questions if you want.
Well, I know I've heard a lot of what you said, and some bits I agree. I hate Corbyn, but it's the first time in my life I actually like what he said. I absolutely detest the man.
Right.
He's a communist and a communist sympathiser. But I liked what he said, and it was accurate to what our government should have done. They've gone in with great big boots.
Can I ask you a question?
Bigger things at stake in the EU that people are out there. A lot of people know this. But we're not
Kathy,
talking about
I think you're crackers, but we're not going to fall out.
I know.
All right.
That's what happens, you see, down here.
What I'd like you to tell me is your sort of top 3 sources for news, if you don't mind.
All sorts of things.
Yeah, that's why I said the top 3.
Well, who are my heroes?
No, where do you get your information from? So you're the top 3.
Through a political party that I'm in, through
what political party is that?
People, and nearly 60 years of human nature.
Yeah, Kathy, as I said, we're not going to fall out. So what political party is it?
Why do I need to say that?
Well, because you're a common sense mum.
You're just trying to put me in a box, and I'm not in a box. I'm neither Conservative nor Labour. Not that they are Conservative.
But you told me that you hate Jeremy Corbyn, but you won't tell me who you like.
Well, he doesn't represent. I don't represent.
That's a bit odd, Kathy. That's a bit odd.
Jeremy Corbyn do not represent the real people at
So
here.
you'll tell me who you don't like, but you won't tell me who you do like. I think everybody knows what political party you're referring to.
There's not political parties out there. I'm just a people.
There's no shame in it. And the second one after UKIP, it was YouTube, was it?
Well, if you're saying UKIP I was a Brexiteer and I voted for UKIP, yes.
Yeah. So, and what was the third one? 60 years of common sense.
Yeah, 60 years of common sense, looking at people, working with people.
So
all
UKIP, YouTube, and 60 years of common sense have led you to the conclusion.
No, I'm just a people listener. I listen to people. I watch people. You don't have to be an intellect. You don't have to diss me because I haven't got a university degree.
How do I know you haven't got a university degree? Why bring that into it?
I know you're an intellect, and I know you've travelled, and I know you're a...
Kathy, why are you making these sound like bad things?
No, I'm telling you now, the EU
what you're telling me
is this country.
What you're telling me is that your opinion, which is based on UKIP and YouTube, is worth at least as much as...
I listen to other people.
For example?
All sorts of people.
Well, just give me some examples.
In my life.
Go on.
Okay, so anybody who speaks up, say, to tell you about the tyranny they've escaped and what that tyranny is about, do you think that they lie? Do you think
Kathy,
Telford are lies?
I don't know why. What are you talking about now?
To talk the truth. Because you're asking me where I get my beliefs, as though my beliefs.
So the idea that the government has essentially endangered the life of a police officer in order to stop Brexit. I was just interested in whether or not you'd work that out for yourself, or whether or not you'd...
whoever did it was careless.
Whether or not
unfortunately, our great police...
Kathy, I need to get a word in edgeways at some point, Kathy. I think... So, again, I just say, did you just...
Conversations. You said some great things, but you're still not hitting the nail on the head.
No, well, I can't compete with UKIP and YouTube, because the depth of knowledge and investigation undertaken by...
I'm not with UKIP anymore.
Right. So what political party do you get all your news from, then?
Say.
All right, Kathy.
Why don't we just start listening to people who are telling the truth about...
Because you have to ask, don't you? If someone claims that they're telling you the truth, you have to ask what the source is. Don't you, Kathy?
How about with that?
What?
I don't believe it, and I'm not alone in believing that.
Well, that we can agree on. You are definitely not alone, but you are, I'm afraid, quite crackers.
The man in the front row here. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, the situation is, if I may say, we had a referendum. The majority of the people voted to come out of it. As a government, and as a shadow government, you weren't expecting that result. You were so confident you weren't going to get the result, you don't actually know what you're going to do. We need to get on with it. I think the events in Salisbury are a smokescreen, possibly, and an excuse for us to try and hop on the bandwagon and say we should remain in Europe as part of an international security.
All right, and the man in the check shirt, hold on, come to the man there. Cox.
Sorry, Bron.
No, it's okay.
Doesn't sound it.
Actually.
I think it's a disaster. I really do. I think it's an absolute disaster. I don't think... I mean, this is... If there ever was a time for united Europe, it is now. Politically, we need to be united. We do not need to be separated. We really need... You know, because we are very vulnerable at the moment. We've just seen it, and it's not a smoke screen. It happened. It's not a smoke screen installed. It's absolutely not. I completely disagree with you then. You know, there are two people lying in a hospital, and they'll tell you it's not a smoke screen. It certainly isn't. That really angers me. Sorry, but it does anger me.
Now, it was billed as Gavin Williamson's first major speech as Defence Secretary, and the stakes were high, given the government's standoff with the Kremlin. It was a chance to show a Churchillian spirit, maybe, a show of strength to Britain's global enemies. Well, how did he do? Let's take a look.
What we will do is we will look at how Russia responds to what we have done. It is absolutely atrocious and outrageous what Russia did in Salisbury. We have responded to that. Frankly, Russia should go away, it should shut up. Frankly, Russia should go away, it should shut up. Frankly, Russia should go away, it should shut up.
Well, joining us now is Patrick Kidd, political sketch writer for The Times. So what did you make of it, Patrick?
I was surprised that school's broken up this early. I thought that was until closer to Easter that we'd see.
It's a few more weeks, yeah.
I know. He's struggling, isn't he? And I confess, I put a 10 on Gavin Williamson to be the next Prime Minister last summer before I'd actually seen him in action. Well, he was moving through. There was all this talk about him being the Francis Urquhart, the chief whip that was knifing aside his rivals. This wasn't particularly good, though. I mean, this wasn't diplomacy. When they talk about Winston Churchill marshalling the English language and sending it out into battle, I mean, this was Gavin Williamson grabbing the English language and saying, do you want to fight behind the bike sheds?
I mean, you and your colleagues have written pretty excoriating articles and sketches about him. Do you think that's fair? I mean, John Cracer said he sounded like a not very bright sixth form student who was being forced to read out his unfinished history essay in front of the whole class.
Yeah, I think that is fair. You need gravitas, and at times of national crisis you need to actually have a sense that you're in command of the situation. OK, it was an ad-libbed response, it wasn't part of his speech, but it was still... It was worrying, and it's delivered in that sort of squeaky Alan Bennett voice, and he looks a bit like a sort of a young Albert Steptoe as well. It's not the reassuring...
Don't hold back, Patrick. Don't hold back.
The only thing is that the response then from the Russian embassy was to call him, was it, a vulgar old tart? No,
well, fishwife. I thought it was... maybe there were a whole list. Maybe there were a whole list.
He's clearly very impressed. Yes. He's called him a very good-looking young man.
Right. Well, good old Gavin Williamson.
Frankly, Russia should go away, it should shut up.
Jeff has called from Edmonton. Hello.
Hello there. Yes, thanks for covering this, Sheila, because there's been a media blackout when it comes to the BBC on this matter.
No, there hasn't, but anyway.
Well, you know...
well, there hasn't.
It's a matter of opinion.
It's not. It's a matter of fact, Jeff.
Well, there's no coverage of this on the BBC.
There is.
There isn't, I'm afraid.
Well, there is. But anyway, we're LBC.
You know... It all boils down to the fear of being labelled racist. This is the crux of the matter. The police, the council, everybody's tiptoeing around, scared that they might be labelled racist. But obviously, Islam is not a race. So there we go with that one. But let's go into this a bit further. Now, the Muslims do know about this problem within the Pakistani community. And, you know, obviously they are concerned about it as well as everybody else.
And
all right, Jeff. I'm not apologising. People, when I just bring a bit of reason to bear on this, people say I'm apologising for rapists. Clearly, I would never apologise for a rapist. You never talk about the white problem of abuse that we have in this country.
Shall we talk about it then?
Well, there is one, just so you know. It's just that we don't call it the white problem. So don't call it the Muslim problem, because it isn't. Nor is it the Pakistani problem, because there are plenty of law-abiding, decent Pakistani men and women in this country. It so happens that these grooming gangs are mainly Asian, and that can't be ignored. But
87%, Major Giles said the other day.
Yes, but still, most abuse of children in this country takes place in the home or the friendship group of the family, and most of it is done by white men. So if you want to bring it down to race, we'll do it. But if we could just focus on how we protect children, I think it would be much more of a comfortable ride.
We protect children by letting the police be able to do their job without fear of being reprimanded by,
We do. I agree. There was a problem with how this was approached because of race, definitely.
There's a real problem with coming in from the EU, and this has happened all across Europe, is that all the sort of governments that are working with a cultural Marxist elements. And what this does is, not only does it divide everybody up into little groups where, like you say, you can't just blame everyone for but we are unable to attain what's going on. I mean, let me just tell you a statistic. In Sweden, do you know that now that 1 in 4 women in Sweden will be raped in their lifetime?
I don't know that.
Daniel Greenfield. Daniel Greenfield has been quoted.
Have you looked at the statistics of rape and sexual abuse in this country, Jeff?
What I would say is that there are paedophiles in every country, and we all know that. So let's not be stupid about it. Well, what I am saying is that the difference is this is the difference. You've always had paedophiles in this country, and they operate usually on their own. But now you're finding this is the difference between these other grooming gangs, these Pakistani grooming gangs.
They don't operate usually on their own. There's no evidence for that either. There's all kinds of evidence of paedophile rings in lots of countries in Europe and everywhere else in the world, Jeff. You are trying to suggest that people with darker skin are more likely to be rapists, and there is no evidence for that whatsoever. And I think we protect our children best if we, A, have the facts and then give them the facts. Passing on our own prejudice won't protect anybody. Thank you for your call all the same, Jeff. Jeff in Edmonton.
Well, let's go back to your calls. James is in Manchester. James, what would you like to tell us?
Oh, good afternoon, Iain. Just a couple of points on what you mentioned. First of all, the Gavin Williamson comments I found very childlike. As for Boris Johnson, I'm very disappointed in him, Iain, that he's come out with this so soon, and I think it's rather unnecessary. I still personally, and I'm a Tory, but I'm still personally, I want not 100% proof, 110% proof. Now, this may be the mood of the government. Can I just say this in? This may be the mood of the government, but I can tell you now on all the social media I've seen, let me assure you, this is not the mood of the public. The public are not buying it. They're not buying it. Yes, it may come from Russia. Probably did, 99%. It's got apparently Russia's DNA on it, but it could have been any of the Secret Service defectors, anybody that's done this. And I'll give you one thing which nobody's mentioned yet. Whenever anybody dies in suspicious circumstances, even if it's in domestic cases, let alone attempted murder, people go through all those people's bank accounts, their internet records. Skripal's internet records and bank accounts have never been checked to find out whether he's got any other links to any other enemies that not only Putin has, but he might have himself. Why is that not being done?
Well, how do you know it isn't being done?
Well, because it's never been pointed out, which shows you clearly it's never been done.
No, I'm sorry, James, but investigations, people, they don't give a running commentary of all the things that they're doing in investigations. Of course they're checking everything to do with them. I'm sure that's going on. Why wouldn't it be going on?
Well, I'm not convinced, Iain. I'm not convinced.
We can all be armchair commentators on this sort of thing, but let's at least try and have a bit of knowledge before we make these allegations.
Well, having knowledge is waiting for answers, and so I've got a lot of knowledge because I'm waiting for the truth to come out, and so far I haven't seen it.
Well, the truth is out there, James. but obviously you're not convinced that you've had it so far. David is in Ealing. Hello, David.
Hello. I just don't believe this conspiracy theory that Russia was behind this attack.
It's not a conspiracy theory that Russia is behind it. No, because we know that the Russians produced the nerve agent that was used.
And other people use nerve agents?
Not that one. No.
Oh yes, they do.
Oh, do they? Who?
That nerve agent is one of several types of the same type, and it can be obviously known about in England because they wouldn't have been able to identify it unless they had a sample themselves.
Well, you see, we're going around in circles here because we had someone say that yesterday, and you don't know that, nor do I.
Well, no, we don't know any of this. This is why...
No, why make ridiculous claims like that when you've got, frankly, no idea whether they've got a sample or not?
Well, then if you have... Then the ridiculous claim is that the Russians were behind this, even though...
Even though it was manufactured in Russia and it was under Russian state control. That's not a conspiracy theory. That is fact.
It's not...
Yes, it is. It is a fact.
Look, there's a saying, qui bono, who benefits from all this? There's no way that Putin and the Russians will be doing this sort of thing a few weeks before the elections and a few weeks before the World Cup. Why would they do such a stupid thing? They're not stupid. They're not stupid.
Well, for the same reason that they murdered Litvinenko, presumably, because they didn't think they'd be found out.
That's another story. But
so you don't believe that they did that either?
I don't know that either. But what I do not know...
Why is it that people like you, David, always give the Russians the benefit of the doubt?
I'll tell you something. Either you believe the Russians lie all the time and the West always...
Yeah, which I do. Because I look at their track record, and that's what they've done for the last 5 or 6 years on international affairs, on these kind of murders, on virtually everything. They have lied through their teeth.
Well, you say that, but
I do say that.
The three issues that are usually brought up: Ukraine, Georgia, and Syria. Now, was produced by the American involvement.
Here we go. I'm just, you know what, I'm getting sick and tired of having people like you, David, on my programme who just want to believe everything that basically what I now refer to almost as an enemy state. You will put their government ahead of believing our government. You're a disgrace to your country, David.
Oh, come on. Now, look, why should you just assume that the Russians always lie and the British always...
Well, why are you assuming that we lie and don't tell the truth? Well, you're making a damn good case of it.
It's possible that the Russians could have done it. It's possible that someone else could have done it. The point is that there's no investigation that's been done on this issue.
What's most likely in your mind?
Most likely, someone did this to cause trouble against the Russians. Whoever it was a provocation, and it causes a lot of trouble. The Russians are not interested in doing something so absurd a few weeks before the elections, a few weeks before the World Cup.
Why is it that there are 14 Russian citizens who have been murdered, or at least they've lost their lives in very odd circumstances in this country in the last few years?
Have you not heard of the Russian mafia?
Well, it may be that one or two of them have done that, but I don't think the Russian mafia probably have the ability to get hold of this nerve agent. They might, I suppose. It's a remote possibility, but I'm willing to countenance that. But why wouldn't, answer me this, why wouldn't the Russians then say, well, OK, we have lost control of some of this nerve agent and we don't know where it went? Because if they'd done that and actually been honest, we could have had a reasonable dialogue with them.
But the point is that this new thing that's come out now, although it's not that new, is Gluskov has been murdered by someone, and they murdered him quite simply by strangling him.
Yeah.
Of course, it's the most efficient way of killing someone. Why would you go to such a ridiculous point of using a chemical which is far more impractical to kill someone? You can kill people very easily without going to such ridiculous lengths.
I have no idea, nor do you. Hopefully one day we'll find out. David, thank you. Marco is in Ealing. Hello, Marco.
Hi, good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for having me on. I just wanted to say, I think that the mood of the people reflects not only the mistrust in the government, but also the mainstream media, which shows like LBC that have been completely, in my opinion, repeating, in many cases, lies and misinformation.
What lie have we been repeating?
Well, thank you, Ian, for asking me. Let me just raise 2 or 3 points. So neither you or I are scientists, so we can't comment on, the chemical formula of this and that. So all we can focus on are the facts. Some aren't being told to your listeners.
Well, how do you know that?
Well, okay, so the first fact we do know, Iain, is that Theresa May hasn't released any evidence to Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party or to the British public or to the OPCW. That's a fact. They haven't released any single evidence as of yet. So there's obviously...
What would you like them to release? I mean, when she gave quite a lot of detail in both of her statements in the House of Commons, what more would you think she should have given?
I'm glad you alluded to that, Iain, as well, because firstly, before I go on to that point, there's also evidence out there that the mainstream media is just not repeating, and that is that the Professor Mirzanov, who was attributed to creating this so-called Novichok agent, he has actually himself stated that it is not a military-grade nerve agent. It can be made in any fertilizer plant by any competent scientist.
Well, Sky News has tracked down one of the scientists who actually created Novichok under a cloak of secrecy in the former Soviet Union. He's called Dr. Vil Mazyanov, and he was a director of Russia's Chemical Weapons Institute in the 1980s, and now devotes his life to ridding the world of this substance that he created. Well, he spoke to our US correspondent Hannah Thomas-Peter from his home in Princeton, New Jersey, and warned that Novichok was designed to inflict catastrophic and incurable injuries.
Do you feel guilty that you made Novichok and now it's been used?
Yes, I'm guilty. I participated in this criminal enterprise. Because of that, I'm probably most fiery enemy of these chemical weapons. It's a weapon of mass killing, mass murder.
The Russian government has denied involvement in the Salisbury poisoning, but Mazyanov says no one else could have done it. Novichok, he said, is like a fingerprint, and now it's at the centre of a full-blown international incident.
But the media just aren't reporting this.
Well, I mean, I haven't stopped you from saying that, have I?
No, you are, and I do. To be fair to you, you do generally let people speak and give them their fair.
Right, let me come back to you on something. Sure. Do you not think that if government scientists, who are not there to be political, they are there to analyse the evidence that they have in front of them, if government scientists tell the British Prime Minister that this is a military-grade nerve agent, and they give her the name, they say that it was only ever manufactured in Russia, now... On what basis would she? Well, it is.
That's not what they said. If you listen, Iain, if you read Theresa May's statement carefully, which I'm sure you have, her words, the phrase is never deviated from. It is a type developed by Russia, a military-grade nerve agent of a type developed by Russia. She has never, ever once said the sample taken from Salisbury was from Russia. And also, if you bear in mind, you've got Craig Murray. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Oh, please. You see, there you're going to lose your argument in a second.
To listen to the truth, Iain, and your listeners...
You believe that Craig Murray spouts the truth?
Considering that Mirzanov stated that Novichok-like substances were created in Uzbekistan, and Craig Murray was the British ambassador to Uzbekistan. And who do you think demilitarized Uzbekistan's nerve agents in the 90s? The US, Iain. So the point is, I'm not saying it didn't come from Russia, but I'm just saying it's highly likely that it came from other sources.
You know what? Given the choice, I'm going to invite my listeners to as to whether they want to believe the British Prime Minister Theresa May or a totally discredited former ambassador to a former Soviet republic.
What evidence have you seen? What evidence have you seen? All the British people, or Corbyn, or the OPCW for that matter. What evidence has anyone seen to prove that it has come from a laboratory in Russia?
Well, even if I had seen it, I wouldn't be able to judge what it was or not. That's why we have government scientists to do that for us.
Ignorance is bliss in this case.
I'm no more ignorant than you are, Marco.
Well, no, but I've just repeated you certain facts.
I have read what Craig Murray has said on this, and I wish I hadn't wasted it was 5 minutes of my life I'm never going to get back.
So what about Professor Mirzanov, who's clearly attributed as being the creator of it? who's quite happily said it's not a military-grade nerve agent.
Well, how would he know? Because he hasn't actually seen what the government scientists have seen.
But he was attributed to creating Novichok, and that's by the British government. Well, what about on record? And these are all facts.
There's a lot of whatabouts going on here, aren't there?
These are all but these are all facts I'm giving you.
No, they're not facts. You have read conspiracy theories which you've chosen to believe as fact.
It's not just from Craig Murray. Professor Davis, who is a scientist at Porton Down, and he's a representative to the OPCW on nerve agents, has himself stated that the existence of Novichoks has never even been proven. And that is a professor directly from Porton Down, Iain. So I think we need to learn to maybe wait until evidence is given rather than jump to conclusions.
Well, look, Marco, I've enjoyed talking to you. We're clearly not going to agree on this, but
thank you.
All I would ask you is that when you say that the mainstream media are trying to hide things and cover things up and not put things to the British public, I've only been doing this kind of job for 8 years, so I haven't been around as long as people like John Humphreys and all the rest of it. But I have never, in my 8 years doing this, come across anybody in the kind of position that I hold trying to cover anything up or trying to mislead the public. We give our opinions, but part of the joy of presenting on a radio station like this is that we can actually debate things, and you can talk about Craig Murray and you can think that he's a great man and all the rest of it. I will disagree with you.
But you're not open to accepting that you're also prone to making mistakes. And I'm not. This isn't a personal criticism on yourself, but although there was a show last month where you, again regarding Russia, I personally find your views on Russia slightly biased. But you clearly stated.
Well, anybody that has views is going. I mean, they're subjective, aren't they? I mean, I like to think most of the time I can back them up, but
that's true.
You know,
sometimes when you make a mistake, you need to be held to account for. And you clearly stated it was about 4 weeks ago that there were no U.S. troops on the ground in Syria. Now, unless you know more than Rex Tillerson, there are up to 2,000 U.S. troops in Syria illegally that the mainstream media doesn't bother to focus on. I'm just correcting you on that one, Iain, because you did make a mistake.
Well, you know something I don't then, because I perfectly accept that I think there was special forces on the ground, but my point was that I did not believe that there were US troops. But you've made your point, Marco, and you've made it very well indeed.
I know he's a moron.